Welcome back to Screen Crush, I'm Ryan Airy. The ending of Moon Knight Episode 4 upended the entire show. Was the whole series in Marc's mind? Is the asylum in Marc's mind? Now, we've already put out a couple videos, plus our ending explained, which explore those different options. But now, I want to hone in on one specific question about the finale. Who is in this sarcophagus? Now, there are a couple of obvious answers, but we have a few theories that might surprise you. And one theory that I think is very off the wall, but I'm praying to Khonshu that it's true. Seriously, it would be the coolest, weirdest twist in any Marvel show. It's your mom. That's a good one, but wrong video. First, I think one thing about this ending is clear. Even if the asylum is the real world, then portions of this ending are happening in Marc's mind. He cannot physically meet Steven in the real world. So even if he really is in an institution, he is at least hallucinating Steven. So we can reasonably assume that the other sarcophagus is also in his mind. Unless, like, I don't know, the hot new thing for treating the mentally ill is placing them face up in a sarcophagi. But I doubt it. So, whoever is in this thing was either manifested by Marc, or it's something that has infiltrated Marc's mind. So, let's talk about the most obvious answer for who is inside this thing before we get to all the freaky theories.
More like a freaky circle.
This is Marc's third personality. In the comics, he adopts two alter egos, billionaire playboy philanthropist filmmaker Stephen Grant, and in the show, they reinvented Stephen as a hapless, sweet gift shopist.
Are you asking me out?
But in the comics, the other alter ego is named Jake Lockley, a mustachioed cab driver who gathers info from the streets. Now, in later issues of Moon Knight, they make it clear that these alter egos were actually alter personalities, and that Marc had dissociative identity disorder ever since he was a kid. Steven was Marc's childhood best friend, and Jake became more of a protector personality. There was always something darker about Jake. He was a little more prone to violence. Now, in this show, we have seen numerous hints that Marc has more than two identities. Some of these hints were obvious, like when neither of them remember going on a killing spree.
Steven, what did you do? I swear it wasn't me.
But other hints were more subtle, like, why would Marc make a date with this woman?
Best steak in town?
She's pretty, but Marc is like laser focused on his mission, and he's also living in the same neighborhood as his ex-wife, who he's hiding from. He wouldn't risk going on a date at a steak joint and running into Layla, so it's obvious that a third personality is living Steven's life better than him. There are even indications that this third personality took over during the fight for the Scarab back in episode 1. Remember, Steven woke up with his jaw out of place, so it took one hell of a fall to knock Marc out. So maybe in Germany, Marc never recovered from being unconscious. He stays knocked out, and the brutal violence was actually Jake Lockley killing all these people. There's another strange indication of Jake leading Steven's life. In the 4th episode, just before he's supposed to belay down, this happens. Now that's the same sound as when he switched bodies before. And he appeared to punch himself in the jaw. Now maybe this was the third personality breaking out, then punching Steven so he could take over the body. There are other hints that Jake is in this show, like a lot of triple mirrors, 2 different reflections looking at Steven in slightly different ways, and 3 Oscar Isaacs in the end credits. This sarcophagus is also blood red, indicating it has a violent personality. It's also standing up while Steven's was lying down. This indicates that Steven is passive, at rest, while this altar is violent and ready to spring into action. Also, this figure on the sarcophagus looks like a bob bird. Now this is a very interesting addition. The bob bird was an aspect of the mummified person's soul. The bird was able to travel outside the tomb to the outside world, but it always had to return to the body.
Like how Aquaman always has to return to the sea.
Kinda, yeah. It is interesting if this is Jake, because Jake is trapped inside this tomb most of the time, or at least trapped inside Marc's mind. But his Ba, the spirit, is able to occasionally venture into the outside world and do some murdering before it has to return to the tomb. Now, in another video, we speculated that the Jake personality was also combined with the character Raoul Bushman from the comics. In Moon Knight's origin story, Bushman was the evil, murderous psycho who originally left Marc for dead in the desert when he was saved by Khonshu. This could still be the case in the show. Maybe when Marc said,
My partner got greedy and he executed everyone at dig site.
he's actually talking about his alter, Jake Lockley. And because Jake was so cruel and violent, Marc buried him in his subconscious, which is why he's in the sarcophagus. It would also explain why he refers to him in the third person and doesn't remember him being another personality. But there is also another fun personality from the Jeff Lemire comics run that could pop out here. Astro Knight. One of Marc's personalities is the leader of a group of space knights who live on the moon. The Earth has been overrun with space wolves, and all of humanity has taken refuge on their lunar base. Introducing this character would be a super weird direction for this show to take. The Space Knight stories are more cartoony. In fact, it would be a blast if these sequences were animated and Oscar Isaac had to interact with an animated version of himself. A live-action character interacting with a 2D animated character might also be a fun way to bridge the MCU with What If. Now, a few characters from What If are rumored to appear in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, but other than that show never felt as much like it was in the MCU, to me at least, because it's not live action. Introducing a fully animated character into the real world would kind of help us bridge that mental gap. But in the Sarcophagus, it could also be the actual Mr. Knight. Now, Mr. Knight is an alter of Marc's from the comics where he dresses up in a suit, rides in a limo, and he's more of like a violent advisor to the police. He's more calm and collected than Moon Knight. We kind of saw a version of Mr. Knight in the show when Steven imagines what the suit should look like.
Steven, what the hell are we wearing? Don't know. She said I needed a suit.
But that version of Mr. Knight's pretty goofy, and it had fans disappointed and wanting to see a more faithful adaptation from the comics. Now, I do think it would be a little too confusing since we've already seen Mr. Knight on screen once. But don't worry, comic fans, if Deadpool taught us anything, it's that there's always going to be another version of a cool character that they ruined the first time.
Hey, it's me.
So Mr. Knight's a fun theory, but I want to throw one out there that's far more likely. We're all expecting there to be a third Oscar Isaac in the tomb. The credits hint at it, the mirrors, all that stuff I said. So what if, instead, it's Khonshu himself?
But Khonshu is trapped inside a little toy.
Yes, he is, but remember what he says.
Tell Marc to free me.
Now, he could be referring to Marc breaking into the Pyramid of Giza, Mission Impossible style, and breaking the statue, thereby freeing Khonshu. But there might be another option. Khonshu was already on the gods' naughty list. They thought about trapping him in stone, but decided to banish him instead.
You've been banished once for nearly exposing us, Khonshu. And you know we despise your garishness.
So the moon god would have expected there to be trouble with the other gods at some point. He knew that someday they would imprison him. So what if he created a backdoor exit? He could have left a piece of himself inside Marc, like a Horcrux. And that could be who's in the sarcophagus and who's been this third personality. In the comics, one of the reasons Khonshu chose Marc to be his avatar was because he had DID. His fractured mind made him easier to control. At one point, he even said that he was trying to take over Marc's body and squeeze out his mind altogether, although they did kind of retcon that later on. So maybe that is what's happening here. Khonshu is the third man. He placed an aspect of himself inside Marc so the gods could never truly imprison him. Then, at times of extreme stress or unconsciousness, he can assume control of Marc's body. And then he killed all these people, asked this woman on a date, told the security guard his name was Scotty because he couldn't remember Steven's real name. Marc and Steven also seem to ignore the idea that there is a third personality. When they realize that neither of them did the killing, they ignore it.
Listen, if you've got a problem with the body count, I suggest you start listening to that stupid pigeon.
Stay out of my way.
They both see this sarcophagus, but ignore it. This seems like they are programmed to forget about it.
Forget about it.
Now, we've seen Doctor Strange employ a forgetting spell before, so to me, this looks like magic.
Oh, it's magic.
Good job. Like, maybe part of Khonshu's power is that he can will his avatar to magically forget certain things, especially if that avatar already has a fractured mind. I mean, think about it. Khonshu is way more violent than Marc or Steven.
I no longer have.
Kill him.
Marc wants out of their deal, but Khonshu is bloodthirsty.
Then you let me go.
I know that you enjoy the work I have for you.
But we have to ask, if it is Khonshu in the sarcophagus, then is he actually another altar that Marc invented? If that's the case, it would support the theory that he is in a real asylum and that his career as Moon Knight and the Ennead are also all creations of his mind. If that's the case, he could still become Moon Knight, just with no powers like in the original comics. So I'm going to get to my really fun theory, but first here's another one that's kind of off the wall. It could actually be Ammit inside the sarcophagus. In those Jeff Lemire comics, when Marc is trying to escape the mental asylum in his mind, Khonshu tells him that the evil god Set is going to invade the Earth. Marc and his friends eventually find Set in a prison. Then Marc learns that Set was never going to invade the world, and that it was Khonshu all along.
What?
We could see a version of this here, except it's Ammit who's been captured. And then she would be a lady with a crocodile head who's like,
"Hey, I never had any desire to judge anyone. Khonshu is the real villain."
Khonshu could have set up Harrow, his former avatar, to think that he was doing the will of Ammit. But in fact, Khonshu was setting up an intricate plan to break Marc's mind so he could assume control of his body. Maybe it was Khonshu's plan to get captured, since that's like what every villain does these days. And he did this so he could infiltrate the pyramid.
That's our fun. but a little convoluted.
Yeah, you're right, it's kind of convoluted, which is why I hope the show is going to go with my favorite silly option for the sarcophagus.
Who? Who's in it?
Kevin Feige.
Marvel producer Kevin Feige? That's ridiculous.
No, it makes perfect sense. See, in the comics, Marc starts to shift in and out of his identities, experiencing different realities. Sometimes he's on a journey through the pyramid. Other times he's in this neo-noir world of Jake Lockley, or the cartoon Space Knight. But sometimes he is a movie producer named Stephen Grant, and Stephen Grant is filming a movie about Moon Knight. It's the perfect fantasy for Marc to have. Feige, or showrunner Mohammed Diab, comes out of the sarcophagus, someone yells cut, and they all laugh because we just saw a blooper of the show. Maybe the boom mic is in the shot. The camera pulls back like in Roger Rabbit to reveal that we're on a set. The fourth wall is broken, but Marc does not understand what's happening. This would be the ultimate way to put the audience into Marc's shoes. We would no longer understand what was real and what wasn't.
Like in WandaVision.
Do you want me to take that again?
Exactly like in WandaVision. And of course, the whole thing would still end up being in Marc's mind, just like WandaVision was an illusion that she created. This would also explain why some of the show's effects were a bit dicey. Heavy spoilers even pointed out that the fakeness of the roof scenes imply that they were filmed on a soundstage. They definitely don't appear to be filmed outdoors. I mean, the lighting's off, there's this weird preciseness to Oscar Isaac's edges. The whole thing looks like a blue screen. So it could be that all these Egyptian sequences were actually a film within a film, but Marc was not able to tell reality from fantasy. And during this chase, we can actually see the camera operator right here. The only way to explain that is this is not reality. But that's just a fun theory that I have. Who do you think is in the sarcophagus? Let me know in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, welcome to the channel. We're really happy to have you. Make sure you subscribe and ring that bell for alerts. For Screen Crush, I'm Ryan Airy.